8th of the April, 217 AD. Through the pre-dawn mist, the sun's rays barely touched the majestic marble walls of the baths of Caracalla, an architectural marvel designed to offer Roman nobility, pleasure, serenity, and a sense of exclusivity. Yet, on this day, no carefree laughter or lively political debates would be heard. In less than an hour, this opulent complex, a symbol of the empire's grandeur, would become the stage for a meticulously planned and coldly executed atrocity that would shake the very foundations of society. The exquisite mosaics, once reflecting divine splendor, would become silent witnesses to a tragic metamorphosis, an emperor consumed by paranoia, transforming a temple of health and prosperity into a sinister hall of political execution. What is about to be revealed is not merely a beautiful legend or the product of a fevered imagination, but authentic events recorded in ancient chronicles and corroborated by the meticulous research of modern archaeologists. This is a tale of how all-consuming mistrust became a deadly weapon, exposing the merciless face of the most advanced civilization of its time. On this occasion, history will not present itself to us in the gleam of triumph, but as a somber reflection of the pervasive fear that permeated the deepest recesses of the human soul. To comprehend the tragic events of that night in the baths, one must go back 2 months. In April 217, Caracalla, son of Septimius Severus, an emperor who inspired terror with his cruelty and commanded respect with his military might, fell at the hands of an assassin during a military campaign in Mesopotamia. The role of executioner was taken by Marcus Opellius Macrinus, the Praetorian prefect, a man of humble origins who owed his ascent not to noble birth, but to his extraordinary administrative abilities and a cold-blooded talent for intrigue. Caracalla's demise was not the result of a spontaneous impulse. It was a treacherous conspiracy, meticulously crafted in the corridors of power. Senators, representatives of ancient patrician families, and military commanders wove intrigues in the shadows, providing funding, valuable intelligence, and establishing connections. And although historical memory has assigned Macrinus the role of sole assassin, he was merely the tip of an iceberg, concealing an entire network of conspirators. However, as history shows, the fate of conspirators is rarely straightforward. Upon becoming emperor, Macrinus found himself caught in a deadly dilemma. Yesterday's allies, who had brought him to power, now posed a threat, for they knew too much. They were privy to the minutiae of the assassination attempt, the names of the plotters, and the betrayals that had cleared his path to the throne. Distrust quickly spiraled into paranoia. Macrinus saw traitors everywhere, shadows weaving intrigues even in the most secluded corners of the palace. Like any usurper, he grasped a brutal truth: shed blood demands new victims to maintain power. Rome, outwardly calm and magnificent, was in fact teetering on the brink of an abyss, gripped by universal suspicion. At the epicenter of this tension, Macrinus began to devise a plan to eliminate his former accomplices in one swift blow, in a place steeped in symbolism and mortal danger: the baths of Caracalla. In the very heart of the eternal city, before dawn had even painted the horizon, 8th of April became a day of ominous assembly for 15 pillars of Roman nobility. The imperial seal, a symbol of unchallengeable authority, summoned them to the magnificent baths of Caracalla, a place where the fate of the empire was to be decided at the dawn of a new era. Among the invited glittered names, each resonating like a challenge. Lucius Cornelius Caepio, whose ancestors had gained glory in battles against Hannibal himself, embodied the pride of an ancient lineage. Gaius Fulvius Plautianus, a merchant lord whose wealth rivaled the state treasury, symbolized economic power. Marcus Flavius Quartus, a renowned veteran of the Germanic wars, hardened in the fire of countless battles, carried the burden of military valor. And finally, Marcus Apellius Macrinus Jr., the young nephew of the deceased emperor, unwittingly a keeper of the dark secret of the conspiracy that ended Caracalla's life. Each of them represented a potential threat to the new ruler: wealth, noble birth, political influence, or dangerous knowledge. Macrinus had summoned them not for counsel, but for condemnation. The baths of Caracalla, that symbol of Roman luxury, transformed into a sinister theater. The monumentality of its architecture allowed the praetorians to discreetly take up key positions. The high vaults absorbed any sound, and the ingenious drainage system promised swift disposal of the traces of the atrocity. Where an ordinary observer saw merely a temple of delights, Macrinus perceived a perfectly prepared arena of death. The tragedy unfolded within the walls of the Caldarium, transforming it into an arena of death. Members of the noble families arrived one by one, clad in their finest garments, with an unwavering conviction that they were attending a momentous assembly. Some carried scrolls filled with proposals and ideas, others family seals intended to ratify important agreements. Not a shadow of doubt crossed anyone's mind that they were walking towards their final hour. As the chosen group gathered in the heart of the Caldarium, surrounded by majestic marble columns and mosaic panels gleaming in the rising sun, the silence became almost palpable. A light steam rising from the pools, like a ghostly veil, concealed the ominous presence of unseen danger. And then came the deafening metallic clang of doors slamming shut, announcing that the trap had sprung. This sinister sound, like a thunderclap, reverberated through the vaults of the Caldarium, leaving behind an oppressive silence. And at that moment, from the side corridors, like shadows from the underworld, 50 praetorians emerged, forming an impenetrable wall. In their hands were not swords and spears, but heavy war hammers, tools more suited to executioners than to warriors. In an instant, the veil fell from the patricians' eyes, and they realized the true purpose of this fateful gathering. Instinctively retreating, they stumbled against the cold marble columns as if seeking protection from them. Others, in a panic, rushed toward the exits, but these were already securely blocked by interlocked shields. The warm air, previously filled with steam, became stale and suffocating, like a harbinger of imminent doom. In the very heart of the magnificent baths, beneath the shade of the mosaics, a scene worthy of a tragedian's pen unfolded. Doomed to die like actors in a theater of the absurd, they awaited their fate. Centurion Marcus Junius Brutus II, a renowned warrior whose shoulders remembered the weight of 20 years of battles, stepped forward. His voice, like the toll of a bell, resonated through the hall. In the name of Emperor Macrinus, conspiracy against Rome is punishable by death, agonizing and inescapable. The first to break the silence was Marcus Apellius Macrinus Jr., the emperor's nephew, who naively believed that kinship would be his salvation. He demanded an audience with his uncle, but in response, only heard the order to begin the execution with him. Blood relation became a sinister symbol before the emperor's will, all were equal. The hammer descended upon his head, and a sound, like a funeral knell, filled the space. Blood stained the faces of the Olympian gods on the mosaics, transforming luxury into an arena of death. Panic seized the condemned. Lucius Cornelius Caepio, the living embodiment of Republican glory, desperately appealed to the Senate for trial, but received only a blow that sent him reeling into a pool whose waters began to redden. The Republic had long since vanished. Now the emperor was both judge and executioner. Some tried to beg for mercy, some desperately resisted, while others froze in stupor, awaiting the blow. All understood that the caldarium of the baths had become their common grave. The bloody bacchanalia had only just begun. Within the Roman baths, a terrifying scene of slaughter unfolded, transforming the caldarium into a ritualistic place of sacrifice. Clouds of steam rising from the pools mingled with streams of blood, forming an ominous mist through which the outlines of mangled bodies were barely discernible. The measured blows of hammers descended with relentless precision, creating a chilling symphony of cracking bones and muffled groans of agony. Gaius Fulvius Plautianus, an influential merchant, desperately tried to save his life, offering untold riches capable of funding an entire army. However, the soldiers remained deaf to his pleas. They had been given a clear order: no leniency, no deals. The very first hammer blow shattered his shoulder, and his curses against Macrinus were swallowed by the hollow echo of the marble walls. Marcus Flavius Quartus, a hardened veteran of the Germanic campaigns, displayed unexpected resistance. Despite a broken arm, he managed to wrench a hammer from an executioner and bring it down on a praetorian's head before being surrounded and overcome. His desperate attempt at resistance did not alter the grim outcome, but it became enshrined in history as a symbol of unwavering dignity. Quintus Fabius Vibulanus, a youth of merely 19, was forced to witness this bloody carnage. His childlike pleas for his mother sharply contrasted with the cold discipline of the executioners. He was deliberately kept alive to behold the death of each of his companions and to comprehend his own fate. Only when the last of the condemned had fallen did the fatal blow strike him. A crimson tide engulfed the marble slabs, once gleaming with purity. The waters of the pools, meant to offer coolness and serenity, now reflected only horror and death, transforming into a sinister mirror where fragments of clothing and shattered bones swayed in the bloody depths. The intricate mosaics, depicting mythological tales of gods and heroes, seemed to mock the tragedy unfolding within these walls. Their vibrant colors faded beneath torrents of scarlet liquid, relentlessly flowing into the drains. For 47 minutes, the praetorians, like merciless machines of death, methodically carried out their dreadful duty, allowing no one to escape their allotted fate. When the last breath ceased, the ensuing silence was ominous and oppressive, far surpassing the horror of the dying screams. But the bloody bacchanalia was not over. The worst was yet to come. Beneath the vaults of the marble dome, where pleas for mercy had only recently echoed, Centurion Brutus II raised his hand, signaling the start of the second phase of the monstrous operation. Macrinus's order was crystal clear. The bodies were to be disfigured beyond recognition. Destruction was not enough. The very memory of the victims needed to be erased, their names torn from the history of Rome. For about 2 hours, the praetorians, with chilling composure, indulged in a monstrous act of vandalism, reducing human bodies to shapeless mounds of flesh. Skulls were crushed, faces disfigured into grotesque masks, torsos torn open, exposing entrails. Only signet rings with family seals survived this chaos, carefully removed from blood-soaked fingers. They served as the sole testimony to the tragedy that had occurred, and the only trophy Macrinus allowed his soldiers to keep. The caldarium, once a symbol of luxury and tranquility, had been transformed into a nightmarish scene of destruction. The magnificent mosaics were shattered. The columns, once proudly soaring, were now defiled with crimson stains, and streams of blood flowed into the drains intended for thermal waters. A heavy steam, saturated with the repulsive metallic scent of blood, enveloped everything, forcing even hardened soldiers to cover their faces with wine-soaked cloths to endure the unbearable atmosphere. 3 days after the tragedy, an unprecedented cleanup operation began. Over 100 specially selected slaves, brought from slaughterhouses in surrounding towns, were tasked with this horrific work. Under threat of certain death, they toiled without rest, using corrosive acids imported from Egypt itself to dissolve the ingrained bloodstains on the marble slabs. Human remains, like rubbish, were loaded into closed wagons and dispatched to crematoria located on the outskirts of Rome. There, the ashes of the victims were mixed with lime and ruthlessly cast into the Tiber, forever erasing any physical traces of the tragedy. After the work was completed, the baths appeared to the citizens as if nothing had happened. The mosaics once again shone with vibrant colors. The marble gleamed, reflecting the sunlight, and the water in the pools was crystal clear. However, behind this meticulously crafted facade of idol, the entire Roman Empire began to feel a sinister premonition. Macrinus, meanwhile, had already prepared the official version of events. The executed patricians, he claimed, were conspirators, and their timely elimination had averted an imminent civil war. This lie was as carefully conceived as the bloody massacre itself, designed to conceal the true scale of the atrocity, the bloody aftermath. At first glance, Macrinus's plan seemed flawless. The bodies had been cremated and their ashes scattered into the Tiber. The mosaic floors gleamed with cleanliness once more after several days of diligent work. However, there was one undeniable fact that could not be concealed: the simultaneous disappearance of 15 of Rome's most influential individuals. Empty seats gaped in the Senate, like silent witnesses to the tragedy. The names of families that had left an indelible mark on the annals of the Republic were no longer heard within the assembly halls. Throughout the city, ominous rumors spread like wildfire. How could such a significant number of patricians vanish without a trace in a single night? Macrinus reacted immediately. Just 3 days after the massacre, he dispatched imperial decrees to all provinces. According to the official version, the 15 individuals had been implicated in a conspiracy to overthrow the government and restore the Severan dynasty. Their deaths were presented as a preventative measure, an act of defending the empire's interests. In the forum squares, imperial heralds read out the decrees to bewildered crowds. The edicts contained fabricated letters allegedly discovered among the personal effects of the executed, which detailed the bribery of legions and secret dealings with provincial governors. The lie was skillfully woven, but alas, it failed to deceive everyone. Following the tragic events that shook Rome, when the merciless hand of the executioner ended the lives of many innocents, the families of the deceased could not remain idle. Overwhelmed by grief and a thirst for justice, they began the painstaking and clandestine work of uncovering the truth, hidden beneath a veil of lies. By bribing trusted slaves and questioning merchants whose eyes had witnessed unusual troop movements on that fateful night, they gathered fragments of information, like shards of a broken mirror, attempting to piece together a complete picture of the tragedy. Some even managed to recover items secretly preserved by loyal servants, blood-stained scraps of fabric, broken ring fragments, strands of hair by which the victims of the atrocity could be identified. Amidst the widespread outrage, Julia Domna, Caracalla, as mother, stood out, her voice resonating with particular force. Returning to Rome several weeks after the bloody massacre, she activated her extensive network of informants, stretching from Alexandria to Antioch, to reconstruct the events of that tragic morning step by step. Every piece of leaked information she received, like a drop of water, eroded the stone of the official version Macrinus tried to impose. The emperor, like a predator, sensed danger. His paranoia reached unbearable limits, poisoning his mind and driving him to insane acts. He began to ruthlessly eliminate those who dared to ask too many questions, destroying slaves and minor officials merely on the rumor that they might have seen something. Instead of solidifying his power, these desperate actions only underscored his involvement in the atrocity. All Rome, it seemed, could smell the blood that permeated the air beyond the bath's walls, despite the marble gleaming once more, and every forcibly imposed silence only intensified suspicions, turning them into certainty. While the Roman Empire attempted to comprehend the tragic loss of 15 members of the patrician nobility, a complex intrigue unfolded in the shadows, destined to alter Emperor Macrinus's fate. Behind the scenes, Julia Maesa, sister of the late Julia Domna and aunt of the cruel Caracalla, wove her web. Far from the bustle of the capital, in the Syrian city of Emesa, she carefully observed the new ruler's signs of weakness and indecision. Julia Maesa was Macrinus's complete antithesis. If he relied on fear and paranoia, her weapons were patience and cold calculation. She had witnessed Caracalla's brutal deeds, his sudden death, and the subsequent bloody massacre in the baths, and she managed to discern what had escaped many. Macrinus had made a fatal error, common to most usurpers. He had eliminated his supporters before he could consolidate his power. The influential aristocratic families, deprived of their leaders, yearned for a banner under which to channel their wrath and restore their tarnished honor. And Julia Maesa was ready to provide them with such an opportunity. Her meticulously devised plan centered around 14-year-old Varius Avitus Bassianus, her grandson, who served as a priest of the Syrian god Elagabalus of Emesa. In a daring and risky move, Julia Maesa began to spread the rumor that the young priest was not merely a religious heir, but Caracalla's illegitimate son, a direct descendant of the Severan dynasty, which many in Rome still revered. This idea spread with incredible speed, like wildfire in a dry forest. For the humiliated and insulted aristocracy, this boy became a symbol of long-awaited revenge. Caracalla's blood against the usurper who had not only taken his life, but also destroyed those who had helped him ascend the throne. Macrinus's power, increasingly precarious, was overshadowed by his growing misunderstanding of the scale of the threat looming over him. He naively believed that the brutal massacre in the baths had strengthened his position. However, in reality, it only accelerated his inevitable downfall. In the corridors of the forums, voices of discontent grew louder. Whispers circulated that the gods do not forgive the shedding of innocent blood, and rumors spoke of Caracalla's spirit returning in the guise of a new Caesar. These rumors gradually escalated into a powerful political movement, bolstered by military force. Julia Maesa skillfully rallied the surviving patricians and generously bribed military loyalties. She knew perfectly well how soldiers worshipped Caracalla, the warrior emperor, who personally participated in campaigns, showered them with gifts and lavish promises. Against this backdrop, Macrinus appeared merely as a faceless bureaucrat, his hands stained with the blood of the aristocracy, lacking the charisma that legionaries admired. Rome stood on the brink of tumultuous change. While the marble of the baths vainly attempted to conceal the traces of the bloody tragedy, in Syria, a devastating counterblow was already being prepared, destined to send Macrinus into oblivion. In the spring of 218, the barely perceptible winds of discontent escalated into a furious hurricane. The legions stationed in Syria, the very ones that had once marched into battle under Caracalla's banners, became the main epicenter of the rebellion. Unrest in the army escalated, foreshadowing an inevitable revolt. The soldiers, hardened by battles in eastern campaigns, became the target of secret visits from the envoys of the cunning Julia Maesa. The emissaries arrived with chests full of gold and a skillfully crafted story that Caracalla lived on in his son and yearned for revenge. These words had an immediate effect. Memories of the cruel but generous emperor were still fresh in the soldiers' minds. Caracalla had showered them with gifts, promotions, and all sorts of privileges, buying their love, which outlived even his death. Against this splendor, Macrinus appeared merely as a dry and soulless bureaucrat, incapable of inspiring true devotion among the troops. The initial spark of rebellion ignited in Raphanea, a Syrian camp where tribunes openly swore allegiance to Bassianus, proclaiming him emperor under the name of Marcus Aurelius Antoninus in honor of Caracalla. The soldiers, swept up in enthusiasm, raised their standards, stained their shields with the blood of sacrificial lambs, and heralded the new emperor's name with a roar that drowned out any imperial decree. News of the uprising spread with incredible speed, like wildfire across a dry steppe. Within mere weeks, the cohorts of Syria and Phoenicia had joined the revolt. Even garrisons in Egypt began to show signs of sympathy. This was a direct, open, and audacious challenge to Macrinus's authority, foreshadowing severe turmoil for the entire empire. Emperor Macrinus, stunned by the lightning-fast spread of the rebellion, attempted to quell it with fierce reprisals, worthy of Caracalla's memory. He ordered the immediate arrest of any senator or tribune suspected of the slightest sympathy for Antoninus. Executions of alleged traitors in the city forums were intended to strike terror into the hearts of Romans, but instead of suppressing the revolt, these brutal measures merely fanned the flames of popular anger. Meanwhile, Julia Maesa, like a skilled strategist, orchestrated the rebellion from the shadows. Every message, every rumor disseminated, Every bag of gold dispatched from Emesa was meticulously calculated to reinforce the belief that Antoninus was the legitimate heir and Macrinus a dishonorable usurper. The Roman Empire stood on the brink of an inevitable civil war, with a paranoid emperor on one side and a young man, a symbol of hope and retribution, on the other. And so, when these two opposing forces clashed in a deadly struggle on the battlefield, the course of the empire's history was irrevocably altered. On 8th of June 218, the plains near Antioch were covered with the colorful standards of the warring armies. On one side stood Emperor Macrinus, commanding an impressive force of approximately 50,000 warriors, including battle-hardened praetorians and loyal legions. On the other was an army that seemed less formidable, but was invigorated by Julia Maes's gold, an unshakable faith in Antoninus, and a yearning for the days of Caracalla's rule. Dawn painted the horizon, bringing with it an ominous silence that portended the imminent clash. The warriors understood that more than just the fate of a ruling dynasty was at stake. The very future of Rome hung in the balance. Macrinus, clad in gleaming golden armor, stepped forward, aiming to inspire awe and respect with his mere presence. He was accompanied by generals whose faces bore the grim marks of numerous campaigns in distant Mesopotamia. Yet Macrinus's voice lacked the conviction and strength that might have commanded his army's unconditional belief. At the same time, Antoninus, a young boy, sat in a chariot like a triumphant victor, surrounded by the priests of Elagabalus, worshippers of the sun god from Emesa. His speeches were far from strategic plans or military calculations. He spoke as a prophet, as one chosen by the gods, assuring that higher powers were on his side and that Rome would be cleansed of the usurper's defilement. His words, taken up by the soldiers, echoed through the ranks, acquiring the tone of a mystical revelation. The clash proved merciless. Lines of infantry collided with a deafening clang of metal and shouts that tore through the morning silence. The praetorians, known for their iron discipline, initially held the line, but soon uncontrolled desertion began within their ranks. Entire cohorts, hearing Antoninus's name, threw down their weapons and defected to the enemy, as if obeying an unknown call. Macrinus, watching his army crumble before his eyes, desperately tried to restore order and maintain what remained of his forces, but panic proved stronger. The battle quickly escalated into a bloody massacre. Antoninus's supporters showed no mercy. Surrendered soldiers were ruthlessly run through with swords, and the bodies of the fallen littered the plain, a grim testament to the accumulated fury and thirst for change. In the very heart of the ensuing chaos, Macrinus made a fatal decision that sealed his tragic end. He fled, shedding his imperial armor and donning the attire of a simple merchant. Betraying his loyal soldiers, he attempted to find refuge on the dusty roads of Asia Minor. But his flight was devoid of any grandeur or dignity. Just 3 days later, a vigilant centurion recognized him in a modest inn and handed him over to the soldiers who remained loyal to Antoninus's memory. The end of the emperor, who had given the monstrous order for the massacre in the baths, was far from a bloody spectacle. His life was cut short by a sword blow, without the elaborate tortures and humiliations he had ruthlessly prepared for his victims. The irony of fate was that his death proved more merciful and honorable than the fate he had intended for others. His severed head, impaled on a spear, was sent to Rome as a grim trophy. His body, cast into an unmarked grave, was consigned to oblivion, like those of the most despised criminals. With Macrinus's death, the Roman Empire gained a new ruler, a young emperor barely 14 years old, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, known to history as Elagabalus. His ascension to the throne was proclaimed without delay. Julia Maesa, the brilliant strategist and architect of this retribution, presented him as Caracalla's illegitimate son. The lie, skillfully woven and artfully presented, proved convincing enough to secure the allegiance of the legions, who still held the memory of the murdered emperor sacred. The new ruler's enthronement occurred amidst widespread exhaustion from chaos and confusion. The populace, weary after years of instability, accepted his ascension to the throne without the slightest resistance. The Senate, deeply humiliated and intimidated by the bloody massacre in the baths, hastened to pledge its loyalty to the new princeps. An atmosphere of fear pervaded society, and no one dared to speak openly about Caracalla's atrocities in the Caldarium. However, in private conversations within patrician families, the memory of those terrible events lived on. Every feast, every secret meeting in secluded villas served as a reminder of the blood that stained the marble walls. The echo of that massacre forever changed the rules of the political game. The upper echelons of society realized that neither immense wealth, noble birth, nor glorious ancestors could guarantee safety from an emperor's paranoid wrath. Faith in the immutability of the imperial system was undermined, and this deep fissure remained an unhealed wound in the consciousness of subsequent generations. Julia Maesa, in turn, with a chilling composure that seemed supernatural, savored the fruits of her victory. She had not only avenged the death of her nephew Caracalla, but had also placed her grandson on the imperial throne. Transformed from a backstage player into a shaper of destinies, she became the most influential woman in Rome. Nevertheless, the new regime had a dark beginning, overshadowed by the bloody slaughter in the baths. Despite the official narrative, which presented the event as the elimination of traitors, popular memory held a different truth. Rome had seen firsthand that an emperor could, at least for a time, ruthlessly dispose of the empire's elite with impunity. It was an ominous sign, starkly demonstrating that the blood spilled on the exquisite marble of the Caldarium would remain an unhealed wound in Rome's memory. Such is the fragility of power that yesterday's ally can, in an instant, become the most bitter enemy. Ancient chroniclers did not fail to record this horrifying episode. Herodian, a contemporary and eyewitness to the tragedy, recounts the chilling silence that gripped Rome after news of the mass executions. In his view, the bathhouse massacre was irrefutable proof that imperial power had transformed from a tool of governance into an instrument of total terror. Decades later, Dio Cassius, a senator who survived the bloody purge, described the events with bitterness and resignation. His writings convey the conviction that the Senate had lost all meaning. We were invited to feasts and ended up as sacrificial victims. His words serve as a stern warning for future generations. From then on, politics in Rome was conducted not in open assemblies and heated debates, but in the dark corridors of palaces and dungeons, artfully disguised as luxurious marble halls. For those Romans who still believed in the greatness of their civilization, This massacre marked a turning point, beyond which civilization gave way to barbarism. The baths, a symbol of culture, health, and social interaction, became an arena of bloody ritual. What should have epitomized imperial splendor became its most sinister metaphor. The tragedy in Caracalla's baths appears to modern historians as an ominous precursor to impending decline. After this bloody purge, every ruler of Rome was poisoned by the virulent fear of betrayal, seeing potential assassins in their closest associates. Henceforth, the very notion that yesterday's allies were capable of a treacherous stab in the back became a sinister axiom of political life. Rome, still inspiring awe with its military might, began to relentlessly crumble from within, devoured by internal strife and suspicion. Today, tourists visiting the magnificent ruins of Caracalla's baths in Rome marvel at the skillfully restored mosaics and monumental arches, unaware of the grim secret hidden beneath these ancient stones. On one April day in 217 AD, at the whim of a mad and paranoid emperor, 15 of the most influential members of the Roman aristocracy were brutally murdered, reduced to disfigured corpses. The bloodbath in Caracalla's baths is not merely a dark episode from a bygone era. It is an eternal warning that absolute power, intoxicated by its own grandeur, requires no external enemies for self-destruction. It needs only to succumb to the corrosive force of paranoia to reduce a state to ruins.